All right, we'll call for public comment. If there's anyone here wishing to make public comment and be heard by the board members who are here. And I don't see anyone rising to the occasion, so public comment session is closed. And we have the consent agenda, the minutes from previous meeting, and division reports. And it looks like we have just one item in the grants and contract category, family planning title. Anyone here wish to comment on the significance of that particular item? Okay.
And where's that about Title 10 with the family planning? Where's that located?
Okay. Who can speak to that?
Jessica. Sure.
Contract is the last page there.
Yeah, these items should be in the in the packet.
Oh, got it.
Did you find it?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Let the record show there was no vote. And it's our normal procedure to ratify these contracts by an action. We will not take an action. Well, Glenn, what can you tell us that maybe we don't need to take action on your report, but we'll hear your report?
I really don't have a report to give.
Okay. Okay.
May I, Mr. Chairman, jump down a little bit just for Glenn's? Yeah, there's nothing that's happened there. They were meeting fairly regularly, this group of associated with the group, and there were several health districts that said that was a little too much. So I think you're going to see come probably July that those will pick up again.
Okay.
In preparation for the annual meeting, which this year will be in the fall.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of a hiatus until July.
Thank you. We'll move on then to our fiscal report. And while you're still sitting there, let me just say for you, I guess most of you were here, not all of you, at the budget hearing. If you were here, you will know that without question or hesitation, all representatives from the 5 counties voted in favor of the budget for the next fiscal year. And a lot of this favorable vote, lack of question or discussion or any negative comments, is simply because of the way Christine goes about presenting this, along with our director, and I think our Eric, were you at most of the counties this year?
I was in attendance, but I did none of the list. So.
Well, anyhow, this whole thing of approving budgets is going so smoothly with the county commissioners. You wouldn't even believe me if I were to tell you some of the hassles we've had over the years. And so go ahead with your report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will deliver from here today. I would like to speak to your recognition there. It also takes the division administrators and their program people to give fiscal good numbers to develop the budget.
Oh, you think so?
I do. So again, a team effort. Thank you. We will start with our cash history, as we do each month. And this month, ending April 30th, we had an ending cash balance of $5,889,000. That's an increase of $443,000 over the prior month. The main reason for that increase is we did receive in April $359,000 in an opioid settlement funding payment. So that leaves us with 6.96 months in reserves. In our cash balance, we have a total of 1.8 million in opioid settlement funds. If we were to remove those funds, our months in reserves prior to any committed or restricted funds would be 4.77 months in reserves. I'm happy to see that after all of our issues with Luma, we're starting to see our cash balance increase. We're starting to get those payments in. Once we remove any board committed funds of 724,000 and program restricted funds of 2,096,000, that gives us 3.63 months in reserves. So as we go into the new fiscal year, as I've mentioned before, we'll revisit how much money we want to pull out of our general fund or our general investment fund and move into the investment fund where we hold the board committed funds. We'll need to revisit how much we want to move into building maintenance, the 27th pay period. We can move some of this interest money into one of these categories, but we'll be discussing that within the next couple of months once we see how fiscal year in June ends. If there are no questions on the cash history, I'll move on to the monthly budget to actual. No questions? I'll keep this at a high level. Nothing has significantly changed since last month. Our environmental fees are under budget $29,000. That is a change over prior month. Prior month, we were under budget by $77,000. So we had a $48,000 shift there, and that is seasonal. So I hope to see that decrease even more by the time we have reached fiscal year end. Clinical under budget remains the same as previously mentioned. That's due to the staffing issues that we've had in clinical. The other change that we have that I want to point out is grants and contracts. Last month, that was a negative 229. It is now positive of 192 as a variance. And that is primarily related to the opioid funding received, but also a small amount of grant funding that is coming in now from billings. So in total, revenue is over budget by $635,000. Total expenditures is under budget by $1,035,000. And as I've mentioned, we've had open positions throughout the fiscal year. Operating expenditures, under budget by $459,000. I expect that to be less next month as we go into our fiscal year-end close. Total capital expenditures are under budget by $66,000. Trustee benefits, also under budget $57,500. So total expenditures to date, we're under budget by 1.6 million. Again, the majority of that is related to personnel costs. And our excess year-to-date actual is 1.4 million. Once we adjust for our accounts receivable of $1,083,000, our payables of $78,000, that brings us back to our ending cash balance of $5,889,000 once we add in the beginning cash as of 7/1/23. Are there any questions on the budget to actual?
I don't hear you talking about the frustration you went through for several months when the state was changing their systems.
The frustration continues.
Does it really?
Yes, it does. There's still considerable cleanup work to be done. We're still working with the state on a number of issues. It's not just us, it's other agencies as well. We're working to get the invoices to Department of Health and Welfare that were being held from billing due to some credit memo issues, which is not our issue, but the way the system works, it became our issue. So those invoices pretty much relate to December billings, January billings. So we're getting those submitted. So it'll be a challenging fiscal year end, all new processes. So the frustration does continue, but as I mentioned last meeting, next year should be easier, and in the third year, we should be moving along quite well. But it's still a learning curve for everyone, not just us.
So you're including all the other 6 health districts, but even at a broader sense, other agencies within the state.
Absolutely, everyone, all agencies, and the other health districts as well. We're all in the same boat at this point. And again, I have to say, as frustrating as it has been, I appreciate that Dawn was able to approve and support fiscal with having a project manager on board who had 2 to 3 ERP conversions under her belt. Because of her experience, she was able to be very proactive and ask questions of the state. And she actually assisted the state in her questions and being proactive.
Really?
So I think that really put us in a very good position.
Yes. Are you glad to hear that?
Absolutely. I have one question. If I heard you correctly, you says the opiate funds over 300,000 that came in this month or whatever.
Yes.
How frequently do they come in? How long? I just have no feeling for that.
So this year, in total, starting in July of 2022, to date, we have received $2,400,000 in opioid settlement funds. This year, we have received, and by this year, I mean fiscal year 24 from July 23 to date, we have received $978,000 in opioid funding. That's 3 payments. As to the frequency, I'm not certain that it is consistent in the frequency that we receive those monies. So if we were to look at fiscal year 23, last year, we received, and I'm not going to include the county or the city that gave us their money. We received 5 payments in fiscal year 23. And again, this year, we received 3 payments.
And how many more are anticipated?
This is going to go over a period of years. Don, could you refresh my memory?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, it's, when we first started receiving this, we were going to be getting that money for over 18 years now. Year and a half or so, right, Kim, has passed, so we've got about 16 years left.
Wow.
And the challenge is you have multiple entities paying us, multiple pharmaceutical companies paying us. And there's more settlements that are coming.
Wow.
So that makes it frankly very difficult to budget for. And then we have also some, instead of paying annually, they paid like 5 years or 4 years in advance. And then they'll make another, we don't know what they'll do.
Oh, I see.
Challenge for sure on knowing when that money is coming.
Right.
And budgeting.
So the pharmaceutical companies pay the government and then the government distributes it, or how is that?
That process I don't know. What I do know is that money goes through the state attorney general's office. And then 60% of that goes to the state. 20% of that goes to counties and cities. And the remaining 20% go to the 7 health districts in the state.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't have a feeling for it. Yeah.
Well, when you get it, let us know, because we're still.
Well, I'm not saying I have a feeling now, but all I've heard is opiate settlement. Oh, okay, great. But how long, how much,
Cooney County that's getting, who don't allocate to us, they're getting a large amount as well. I only say that because of your work as a coroner.
Right.
And we don't know what they're doing, nor do we need to know
Right.
how they're using it.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Johnson, thank you for asking that question, because it was on my mind a little while ago to ask that and I forgot.
Yeah.
But thank you, because that's information that this longevity, I had no idea that it was going to carry on and make it that difficult as far as your budgeting process.
It can be challenging. So in our ending cash balance, we have $1,850,000
Okay,
sitting in our
Okay.
accounts.
great. Thank you.
Any further questions? No further questions. That completes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Well, now we come, Sandy, are you going to speak, or
Well,
you have the floor right now?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I will I'd like to introduce you to Rebecca Grove. She is with the state of Idaho's Social Security Office, and she would like to share some information regarding the Social Security Section 218 action that we are in right now, as well as potentially what the board would want to consider doing with funds if the vote were to be no. So I will just hand it over to Rachel and let her speak.
You have the floor, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Sandy, Mr. Chair. So thank you so much for having me today. Again, my name is Rachel Grove. I am with the State Controller's Office, and I just want to briefly talk to you about Social Security coverage. And I want to start off by talking about the history of Social Security. And part of that is to understand how we got to where we are here. We have to look back in time to have a better understanding of what all had taken place and and why are we asking some of the questions that we are. So if we look all the way back to 1935, that is when the Social Security Act became law. And at the time of its creation, it actually excluded all government employees. So no government employees were allowed to pay into Social Security at all at that time. And then a couple decades later, in 1951, Section 218 of the Social Security Act was created. And so when we talk about 218 Social Security coverage, or just 218 in general, we're really referring to Section 218 of the Social Security Act. And what that did was it allowed government employees to actually be covered by Social Security benefits if they were not already covered by another retirement system. And so a couple years after that, the Section 218 was amended. So then it opened it up even further and allowed for a choice so that all government employees, whether or not they were covered by a retirement system, or those that were covered by a retirement system, they then had the option to participate in a vote to also receive Social Security benefits. So that is actually kind of why we are here right now. The law hasn't actually really changed much since 1950. So now this is why we are talking about Social Security coverage and participating in a vote for the health district. So a couple things to note about what this vote looks like. This vote is going to be for all eligible employees at the district. And so you might be wondering, what is an eligible employee? And an eligible employee is somebody that is in continuous employment with the health district for the duration of the time that the notice was issued up and through the voting period. And then they also have to be actively contributing into PERSI. And so PERSI is kind of that trigger point for having this vote occur. And because the health district does that you do have employees that pay into PERSI, that is what enacts this vote to actually happen. And so for this vote, it is a simple yes or no question. The question being, would you like to pay into or receive Social Security coverage? And it is either check yes or check no. And the results of this vote is determined on a majority vote. And the majority vote looks a little bit different for Social Security coverage than it does in a typical election vote, where the votes that are counted are simply those that show up to actually vote. But here, it's a little bit different. Every vote counts, and it's all based off of the total number of eligible employees in this at the health district. And so it's a predetermined number that we set as we're going through this voting period. And it is a majority vote, so it's half plus one of all of the eligible, or the number of the eligible employees. And so as they're going through this vote, if they select yes, and if they opt for yes, then that is saying that they are wanting to participate and want to continue participating and paying into Social Security and receiving those benefits. If they select no, then they opt out of Social Security, or that is what they are voting for, is they are voting to not participate in Social Security coverage. And so when we are taking a look at those ballots and determining a yes or a no vote, if the ballot is filled out in its entirety and they have selected yes, then we do count it as a yes vote. If the ballot is filled out in its entirety and they select no, then it is considered a no vote. But what's slightly different is if somebody doesn't vote at all, or if it's not filled out in its entirety, then it is considered a no vote. So in order to have a majority vote for that is yes, we do highly encourage all of the eligible employees to fill out their ballots in its entirety and select whether yes or no on what their vote is, so that we do have an accurate representation of what that vote might look like. So, and the last thing that I do want to touch on is really what happens next if we have this vote and then we see whether or not it's, they have voted yes, they'd like to participate, or no. And so if they participate, or if they elect yes, that they would like that the vote results show a majority vote of yes, then really nothing changes. It's just a bunch of paperwork on our side where at that point the health district then gets added onto that 218 agreement with the federal government, stating that yes, they have elected to pay into Social Security coverage from now on and henceforth, no take backsies. If the health district votes no, then that is where the processes kind of change a little bit. At that point, the Social Security is no longer withheld from the employee paycheck, and then the employer portion of Social Security no longer needs to be sent to Social Security on the health district side. And so that is actually why I am presenting to the board today, so that you can make a decision on what you can do with those funds, or what you would like to do with those funds should the result be a no vote.
If I may, I'd like to ask a question, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Um,
Are you ready for questions, ma'am?
Of course, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay,
I'm here to answer whatever questions that you might have.
okay, Dr. Johnson would like to speak.
Thank you. Rachel, thank you so much for your explanation. I sure appreciate it. Every decision that we make has cost-benefit ratios. And so in other words, from my understanding, Percy is state-based and Social Security, of course, is national. And is there a difference in the stability between the two systems? I know that people have threatened that Social Security is going to be underfunded and not funded, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the state of Idaho is basically has been fiscally stable. Is there a difference in stability? That's question number one. And then number two, is there a financial difference for the employee? I mean, in other words, what funds they receive in the future? Has there been any determination as to are they exactly equal, or does one pay out more than the other? I don't have a feeling for that. So if you could provide that, that'd be great.
Absolutely. And thank you for that question. That's a great question. And I would like to preface that by saying that we are going to be holding an educational meeting with all of the eligible employees, and we invite a representative from the Social Security Administration, as well as someone from Percy, to actually dive deeper into the intricacies of both of those systems and to be able to answer those questions. My role is really being a liaison between the federal government as well as the local entities, and establishing just this vote process. And so I don't have a lot of very good details on exactly what the differences are between the Social Security benefits and the stability between that and Percy. I think I would leave that up to the experts to answer. And so that would be a great question to send towards the Social Security Administration and Percy when they come and do their presentation as well. I don't really want to speak for them and potentially misconstrue something.
Right. No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question.
Yes. This is Christine Krummer with a question.
So the answer may be the same that you just gave, Dr. Johnson, but will there be discussion about the Windfall Elimination Provision Act and how that could impact the employees?
Yes, it's great that you bring that up. Social Security actually spends a great deal of their presentation talking about the windfall elimination provision and what that actually would look like should that actually come into play, if there is that no vote, and what it actually would look like to have some of those funds reduced. And they do a phenomenal job of explaining what that looks like in great detail and even provides great examples of how it can play out.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other question? Well, Madam, it appears that you've got us satisfied now. What about questions in the future?
Our office, we are happy to have any questions that you might have. Please send them our way. We do have contacts at Social Security that if there are questions or if there are certain situations that we don't really know the answer to, or if there's something a little bit more policy specific, we do get them involved in some of those conversations and ask for their guidance. So you can always give our office a call or send us an email. That is generally the best way that any future questions that may come up, we are happy to be of assistance to the board and just to the health district in general.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back to Sandy. Does this pretty much take care of what you were wanting from our guest today?
Yeah, I just, Rachel, do you have any information about what options the employer has with the Social Security funds, and what maybe previous employers have done with the funds if they go down this avenue where there is a no vote?
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately the decision is up to the board. Our office, we do not sway one way or another on the decision of what those funds are. And there also really isn't any legal standing on for the board to have to make a decision. But we have found in prior voting experiences that we strongly encourage each local entity for the board to have a decision on and inform the employees on, should there be a no vote, what would happen to the employer portion of those funds, as sometimes it can help sway that, or it can sway the vote. And our goal is to make sure, or to help provide as much education and understanding to the employees so that they know really they're as informed as possible on when they make that decision. And so we have seen in previous experiences that there are some people who, because they are already paying into PERSI, that they look at maybe some of the 401k options and setting up an additional retirement account for the employees and using those funds to potentially bolster whatever retirement they might have from just their original base PERSI account. We've seen some people who might use that as giving out bonuses to their employees, a general increase in wages, and sometimes there's even an option to include that just in your operating budget and to use at the board's discretion. So there are options that we have seen. I know some of the ones that we have talked about recently with some of the other health districts was looking at some of the other retirement systems. There's also the 457 that others have looked into as additional or alternative retirement systems that could potentially take place if there is that no vote and those Social Security funds are no longer being sent to the administration.
Perfect, thank you, Rachel.
Okay, now I need to ask this question. I thought I understood that it's the employees who do the voting, and yet I thought I heard you say it's up to the board. So what did I hear wrong?
Mr. Chair, that's a great question, and it's just a matter of two different decisions. The employees overall will be voting ultimately on whether or not the entity will continue paying into Social Security or not. The decision for the board today would be if there is a no vote at the end of this whole voting period, the employer portion of the Social Security funds that are set aside what would the board, or what would the board want to do with those? Would it be set aside as an additional retirement system? Is it something that would then be brought back into the budget in some way? Ultimately, it's up to the board's decision, and we speak to a lot of the boards to help make excuse me, I'm trying to think of the best way to go about it, to essentially help the employees have a better understanding of just what are some of those options that when they make that vote, when they make the decision, they know what those funds are going to go towards.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
when payments to Social Security, the employee makes a payment to Social Security out of every paycheck. The employer makes a matching payment to Social Security out of the paycheck. So the employees are basically voting to stop or keep their portion of the payment. If employees decide to stop paying into Social Security, that obligation also goes away for the employer. So the question is, if that were to happen, would the employer give that money that they've been paying to the employees in some version, like into a retirement or a pay increase or a bonus, or would we just keep that money in our operating fund or and not pay it out anymore? And that will affect, employees may vote differently depending upon whether they're getting that extra, whether they consider that they're getting that extra money.
Gotcha.
And so that's why we would like to have an idea from the board what they might be considered doing on a no vote before we start talking to the staff, so that they can make a fully informed decision on their part. Does that clarify it?
sure helps.
Okay,
You bet.
good, I'm glad.
You bet. Anything else? Still, Sandy, you have the floor. Are we finished with your?
We are finished with that.
But then I'd like to just say on behalf of the board, thank you for coming on and being a guest at our meeting today. And I'm even getting the idea that there's a certain learning curve in all of this, even for you.
Yes, that there is, Mr. Chair. There's a learning curve. There's a lot of intricacies to this piece of legislation, for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Indeed. Okay. If that's all, then we will move on. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to this?
Can I make another comment, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
The current controller is Brandon, what's his name in the state? Huh? I can't hear last.
Brandon Wolf?
Wolf, right. And I've only met Brandon a couple of times, but the previous controller I knew quite well, and I apologize for the fact I don't remember his name. But I remember him telling us that does anyone remember his name? Jones? Oh yeah, that doesn't ring a bell at all. I'm sorry. But anyway, I remember having discussions with him where he said that I remember having discussions with him where he said that he was called from other states on how is it that how does Idaho pay? Because Idaho, he was actually I mean, because Idaho is in one of the few states in the black nationally, and there's been so much threatening of Social Security, et cetera, and so for the employee stability, I would suggest that that point really be requested or brought out during the employee meeting, so that they're fully aware of the cost-benefit ratio. Because stability is an issue. I mean, it's been threatened to go under for so many years. I mean, as long as I can remember. And if Idaho's in the black and stable and Percy's stable, that's really would be an important point for the employees, not just money, but will the money keep coming? So that's my suggestion.
Thank you, Rachel.
Is she gonna check out now?
Rachel, you can go ahead and drop off the call if you'd like. Thank you so much. I'll be in touch.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me today.
Thank you.
Okay,
Looks like we have Jessica Jameson.
I'm going to recognize Dr. Jameson. Are you with us? It looked like you came on board about 12:52 hours. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
All right, welcome. We now have a quorum, thanks to your coming on board with us. Glad to have you. So that takes care of your presentation at this time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the one question I still want to ask to you, I still had the idea that that this was an all or none situation, but yet I'm hearing you say that if there is a no vote, then the board has to decide what happens with that particular person's contribution from the budget.
Not individually, Mr. Chairman. It's the vote takes it. So if the overall vote, the majority vote is yes, nothing changes. If the
Okay.
majority vote is no, it's not if an individual votes no.
Okay,
It-
see, that's
it's-
how I understood
yeah.
it the first time.
I'm sorry that wasn't
I wanted to
clear.
make sure I still understood it that way. Sure, okay, because if we started having to take this one at a time, I don't think I'd get into
I'd
that.
retire.
I don't want to get into that fight. Okay. Well, as you know, this is Don's last meeting with this board. Unless we want to have a special meeting tomorrow. Do you have anything to say? It's time for your report.
Mr. Chairman, I
Okay,
have,
that's enough.
I have nothing to report.
I'm sorry. Well, it has been great to have you on board for 10 years or somewhere in there. You've been an asset to the district. I was in hopes that the 10 years meant 10 years as director, but somehow we had a big misunderstanding.
I guess we did.
But thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those kind words.
Any open comments you'd like to make, Glenn?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest we go back to item number 4 on the agenda, the consent agenda, since we now have a quorum. We could approve that consent agenda.
All right. Dr. Jameson, do you have an agenda in front of you?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right. The item number 4, the consent agenda, we were not able to take action on that. But now that we have a quorum, Glenn is suggesting that we take a motion to an action to approve the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, based on review of the consent agenda, I would move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Dr. Johnson has seconded this. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, item number 4 on today's agenda, indicate by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Opposed, no. And I believe the vote is unanimous. All right. Was there any other action that we needed to take? I don't know of any. If not, it is time now for an executive session. And I would entertain a motion based on what's on your agenda that we go into executive session based on Idaho Code Section 74-206. A, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we go into executive session as stated under Idaho Code 74-206, subparagraph A, in order to consider hiring a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent wherein the respective qualities of the individual are to be evaluated in order to fill a particular vacancy or need.
Thank you for the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded for executive session. A roll call vote. Glenn,
Yes?
Dr. Johnson,
Yes.
and Dr. Jameson,
Yes.
and I vote yes. We are in executive session, and before all of you leave, let me tell you that I'm going to ask you to leave.